I was waiting for the all mitzvot to fall on my shoulders.
You were waiting for what?
All mitzvot.
All the mitzvot.
All.
All? What's all a mitzvot?
The heaviness of mitzvahs.
Like the yoke
The yoke of
The
the
yoke?
mitzvahs. Yes.
to fall on your
To
shoulders?
fall on my shoulders.
What happened?
Nothing happened. And I decided, well, let's read the New Testament.
What were like the first thoughts you had when I asked if you would come on the podcast?
I was first thinking, okay, what is this going to be about?
So was I.
Am I relevant to this conversation? And I've never done this before. I don't have my diplomas yet or something like that. Not just have a hell of a ton of knowledge in my head that I'm doing my best to continue and get to fulfilling it at some stage.
Right.
So I was like, am I the right person for this? That's why also we talked about if it's not me, then maybe someone else.
Right.
Because I thought of someone maybe in the department who might be better.
Well, I think you have a very interesting point of view when it would come to this, because of the fact, we always hear about the FFB, right? We always hear about the Baal Tshuva, the guy who comes back and
Remember American statements or codes or stuff like that? I have no knowledge of them. I don't know what FFB means.
Okay.
I thought you were talking about the German Special Forces or whatever that is, the FSB, whatever.
I don't know. What is this German forces, FSB?
No, I think they're Russian, actually, the Special Forces.
Well, you're just giving me wrong information all over the place all of a sudden. Give me a second. I'm going to look over here and I'm going to introduce you.
Okay.
We have the honor of being joined by Matan Rubenstein. Rubenstein. Okay, I'm going to try this again. We have the honor of being joined today on the podcast by Matan Rubenstein. He is a student at Hebrew University and is in the process of receiving his BA and MA in Comparative Religion. He's been part of interfaith dialogue for the past 5 years and takes part in the conferences in Germany as part of JCM. Matan, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Welcome.
We hear, or at least I hear often about the Baal Tshuva, the guy who doesn't know anything about Judaism, and all of a sudden he gets the spark, he gets a taste of Torah and comes back, comes back to it and ends up living a Torah life. I don't feel like we necessarily hear
the
other side about the from birth
who
decide to leave or go. I don't want to say leave Judaism, but like
have a different understanding of what Judaism is.
Yeah, especially with growing up with the knowledge that I think a lot of Baal Tshuvas come in and sparks them.
Yeah, it's interesting because, for example, in one of the communities I lived in once, so I was usually the person you come to ask for halachic questions. You come to Matan to ask about halachic questions, for example, how to kasher the kitchen for Pesach, how to do all these kind of stuff. Matan's the group knowledge. I have a hell of a lot of knowledge when it comes to halachic discourse. I have a hell of a lot of knowledge when it comes to all of these things. I'm not saying that I know it all, but it is a dissonance.
But so my question is, where did you get this knowledge? Like what was your upbringing like?
I grew up in a Chabad light family. We made Aliyah in 2002. I was 4 years old.
What does that mean, Chabad light?
It means that Chabad has always been in the background, but we're not necessarily what you would consider a chassid.
Okay.
And then we all prayed Ha'ari. We don't do gebrochts. The Rebbe has a very important part in my family's life, especially with my grandfather and my grandfather's relationship with the Rebbe, which was very close. They were very close people, and yeah. So we moved to Israel in 2002. We moved to a yeshuv in Judea, in Gush Etzion, called Neve Daniel. And they've been living there ever since. And I grew up in a modern Orthodox environment. I grew up in a very open-minded house, where my father always says that he's closer to my beliefs than he's closer to any of my siblings. I'm not completely sure about that.
Like even now?
even now. Um, I grew up feeling different most of the time. Getting to know that the reason for my difference only a year and a half ago, but feeling different most of the time, and also when it comes to to human rights, for example, that was a big thing that was harsh for me when I was growing up. A lot of my schoolmates were like deaf to the Arabs and all that kind of stuff, and I was more like, not all the Arabs deserve to die. Gay people deserve rights, and so on and so forth. And I was in high school. One of the classes, this teacher was out of place in completely every form. But one of the classes that we were sitting was civics, and we were sitting there and we were talking about all kinds of things. And then he said, for the leftist statement, Matan, and that was completely out of place, completely out of forms.
In what context was this in?
I think it was about the different sects of Judaism, which in modern in religious Zionist schools in Israel, the only thing you hear about conservative and reform is half a sentence in civics. You never are really opened to the fact that there are different types of Judaism, except what you think is the different type, which is Haredi. Haredi or secular. There's all kinds of influences that happened in my life that brought me into this turmoil of agnosticism. But I have a very strong sense of justice.
Meaning, what do you mean by a strong sense of justice?
Meaning that, for example, we had Chalamish, Chinuch l'chayei mishpacha,
Which is
education to married life, but it's something you taught in the 12th grade in religious Zionist schools in this country. We spoke about Nida for like 5 minutes, and that's all we spoke about what Nida is. And my teacher, I felt, was such a misogynist in his core, and I had to fight that. And I would have all-out fights with my teacher throughout classes sometimes, because that is not a way to speak about a woman. That's not all there is to Nida. If you want to talk about Nida, let's talk about Nida. But not talk about 5 minutes that twice a month you shouldn't touch your wife for a week and blah 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 blah. That's not the concept of.
But was this kind of attack or style of teaching the experience you got more so just in your school, or is this, or have you spoken to other people who have gone through a similar system and have had similar experiences? Or does it matter?
I don't know. I don't know if it really matters because I'm very different from that Matan these days. The concept of interfaith and the concept of studying religions and all of that came all the way back in my bar mitzvah years.
Really?
And, yeah. It's a bit of a niche story. Kind of, I was waiting for the All mitzvah to fall on my shoulders.
You were waiting for what?
All mitzvot.
All the mitzvot.
All.
All? What's all mitzvot?
The heaviness of mitzvahs.
Like the yoke?
The yoke of the
yoke?
mitzvahs. Yes.
To fall on your
To
shoulders?
fall on my shoulders.
What happened?
Nothing happened. Nothing happened. And I decided, well, let's read the New Testament.
How old were you? Like, because it's not such a common story for somebody to grow up in modern Orthodox, or maybe even Jewish home and be whatever sect you want to call yourself, and still be and want to venture out into chasing other religions. Actually, I don't know if that's so much true. I feel like Jews have this like want to go at other religions rather than Judaism.
I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if I'm a normal case. I've never been normal. But the concept of let's say before that, my favorite books were like the Percy Jacksons, the Harry Potters, that kind of style of things. Percy Jackson has a lot of mythology in it. Not all correct completely, but it has a lot of mythology in it. I've always had like this interest in mythology. And then when it comes to Judaism, my mother will say that I don't have the same spark when it comes to the study of Judaism that I have to other faiths. But to me, Judaism is not a faith, in my perspective. Yes, there is Judaism, the faith, but my Judaism is not the faith. My Judaism is the people.
We had talked about this when we had discussed you coming on the podcast a few days ago, is because I also have this wonderment if kind of religion was almost extracted from Judaism and its people and kind of created two separate entities. Like, is the culture of Bnei Israel supposed to be Torah, or are they...
Depends what you look at Torah. Is Torah a guidebook that is completely and honestly true? No, nothing's not true in that book, and you need to do everything that it says in it? Or is Torah a moral story of our nation, some true, some not, that has a lot of morals in it, and a lot of good things, and a lot of things that are outdated, and it's just one of the books that most nations have some sort of literature culture that comes with them. The Brits have Shakespeare, for example.
Yeah, but Shakespeare's not a book of moral code. You know, I mean, I know you had like the
The
code
Brits have the King James version, let's say that. But
Okay.
it's not really the Brits, because that's a book that most of the world have. But the concept of the fact that there is some story that comes with every nation. Every culture has a story. Every nation has some sort of a story. Is the story of Romulus and Remus, who were born, who were the forefathers of Rome,
right? They're born,
and
raised by a she-wolf.
born raised by a she-wolf. Is that truthful? Or is it a story to show the greatness of Rome, that our founders were raised by a wolf and suckled from a wolf's tit?
Yeah, but just because one story may be mythology doesn't necessarily mean that the other story isn't
Yes.
or is.
Yes, but there's when you come to studying the New Testament, I think the Old Testament, sorry, the Tanakh, critically, I think we've had this discussion several times about the three different types of figures of characters. We have a mythical, we have legendary, and we have historical. If you look at the Tanakh, most of the Torah is completely mythical. We have no second-hand or third-hand evidence, no archaeological evidence, and no other evidence except the Torah.
So I think people would argue heavily with you on these points. I am in no way a master at or intellectually studied the archaeological evidence in regards to the First Temple period and the Second Temple period.
First Temple period, the archaeological evidence that we have is Beit David. It's one sighting that was found, I think, in Lachish, or somewhere else, or Tel Dan, one of the two, which is a piece of it's an inscription of the words Beit David. But we don't have any physical. When a nation goes on a trip that can take 3.5 days.
You're talking about from Mitzrayim to Dead Sea, to the Red Sea.
Lost the fact that if we go back in time if we go through the timeline to when we say that the Yetziat Mitzrayim was, the people who actually controlled this land were the Egyptians. lost that fact. Let's not talk about that fact. But a nation that goes a journey that takes 3.5 days by foot, and it takes them 40 years to do so, leave archaeological evidence. There's no other way. There's no way not to leave archaeological evidence on a 40-year journey of a 3.5 day trip.
So do you not buy the whole their clothes never got torn or ripped, or you're talking about it because no. I
you
hear.
buy the concept that people's clothes never got torn or ripped? And
Do I buy the concept?
If someone would come to you today and tell you that they found a tribe who's been going around Africa, their clothes have not ripped or torn in the last 40 years, would you believe such a thing?
No, I'd want to see it with my own eyes.
Exactly.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it's not true.
That's where you come into belief.
I hear. No, I hear what you're saying also, because the whole idea that like the older generation died off, we don't have any.
Believe that the Torah has some truthful things in it. We can believe that the stories have a lot of meaning and have a lot of serious statements about this world. But is it 150% fact? You can believe that it's not. You can believe in Judaism without believing that Moses was a completely and utterly historical figure.
Can you though? Because I feel like that's such a tenet within Judaism, is like you can't take Islam without Muhammad. You can't take Christianity without Jesus. I don't think you can.
Most of Judaism, most of what we base ourselves off of, is Jeremiah and Yirmiyahu and Yeshayahu is the most commonly referred to prophets, except the Pentateuch. The Pentateuch is the Pentateuch. Let's put it on a special pedestal. The Torah. Sorry.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the Pentateuch, we have the Pentateuch. Yes, the Pentateuch has a lot of very, very ancient pieces. There's the four schools theory. There's a few theories that are very interesting when it comes to the Pentateuch.
What's the four schools theory? I think I've heard this. Like it was gathered by a bunch of other texts.
Certain areas were gathered by certain people, and there was the redactor. That's the fifth person. The redactor is the first person. The redactor is the editor, the person who put one thing next to the other, who decided how to connect them, and all kinds of stuff like that. We have the Jehoites. Other words, the people who always called him Yud K Vav K and then something, or just by Yud K Vav K. We have the Elohites, people who used Elohim mostly. We have the priesthood. For example, it's commonly addressed that the first chapter of Bereshit is written by the priesthood. It's a very priesthood manner. It's a very priesthood way. We have the Deuteronomists. The Deuteronomists is mostly the book of Deuteronomy, Dvarim.
And that's how you explain the shift between styles within the first four books in the last book.
Also, inside of the last book, there's some things that are taken from other sources, and also inside of the first four books, there's difference in style. There's difference in style, and that's what scholars have thought that is the four different schools, because of the difference in style. And we have a lot of legends in the Tanakh that are based off of ancient legends.
So can we
have a demigod?
What do you mean we have a demigod?
Samson,
you could say, is like a Hercules type figure, or Hercules is like the Samson type figure, I guess you could say.
No, you can say Samson is a Herculean figure, but I'm not
Why
sure
are
that
you think that Hercules came before Samson? The idea of Hercules came before the man, or the idea of Samson?
Homerus wrote in the first millennium BC, and that's when he put it on writing.
Homer is the originator of the story of Hercules.
Homer is not the originator of the story of Hercules, but the myths always had influence on each other. But if you want to talk about a myth that's older, we can talk about Gilgamesh,
Okay, let's
who
talk
is a
about
demigod. Gilgamesh is a legendary Herculean, as they would call, figure in Mesopotamian religion. And the first Gilgamesh
Oh, the
tablets
Epic
are
of
like
Gilgamesh.
in the second millennium BCE. Samson, his name is Small Sun. He comes from between Sorah and Eshtaol. There has been a city there with a certain name that goes back to those times called Beit Shemesh. He is a giant. He can carry the gates of a city on his back. Which, and also he broke 2 pillars in a building. If you've been, or have you been to Rome, or
Yes. Yeah.
So pillars are not very close to each other. Let's say.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that he pushed between 2 pillars and dropped down the houses in, I don't know if it was Ashkelon or Gath.
Are we talking about Samson at this current
Yes.
moment? Okay.
Samson is this demigod figure. He is huge. We are told about his size. It is very, very clearly written. The god Shamsh is a very key figure in Mesopotamian and Canaanite religions of those times. The god Shamsh, the god of the sun, is a very integral figure here. And we can't take it away that he just miraculously, coincidentally, comes from between Sorah and Eshtaol.
What does that mean?
Sorah and Eshtaol are places.
Okay.
In the minute between them is a valley in the Emek HaElah. There is a city that is from the days of the Iron Age still exists there. I think even earlier, called Beit Shemesh. Beit Shemesh is literally the house of Shamsh. The house of the sun.
We have a Beit Shemesh here.
It's the same place.
I was assuming
We also have
so.
a Torah and Eshtaol. The whole concept of accepting that the Pentateuch is not a completely and utterly monotheistic book is a hard thing for Jews, and especially rabbinical Jews, to accept.
But why are you? What has you so convinced that it's not? Like, what is the counter argument that someone would make to what you are giving out?
The counter argument is faith. I'm not here to fight with faith. I study faith. It's one of my most important things that I do. Like, what I want to study is popular religion, which is completely faith.
What's popular religion?
Popular religion, I want to study popular religion at a certain time period. I want to study popular religion in between the 4th and 12th centuries in Germany and Scandinavia. I'm going to lay a claim to the fact that I believe that the popular religion had Germanic faith and Christianity mixed together.
What is popular religion, though?
Popular religion is not what the theologians write, it's what the people believe.
Not what the theologians write, what the people believe.
Theologians are extremes.
Okay, so can you give me an example of who, in like modern times or ancient times, who would be the theologians and who would be the popular?
Rambam is a theologian.
Okay.
Not everybody in Judaism believes the way Rambam believed. Rambam has the 13 Ikarim, Rambam has the Moreh Nevuchim, he has exactly how he says to believe, and what he believes is the way to believe, and that's his theological stance. But Judaism is not a dogmatic religion.
Meaning,
in Judaism you don't have the core values of how to believe, you have the core values of how to practice. Judaism is not orthodoxy, it's an orthopraxy. What I mean by that is that
You took the question right out of my mouth. What's the difference?
What I mean by that is the big shift in Judaism happens about how do we serve God. The big classrooms. On the other hand, in the first classroom in Islam was who do we follow, which is a dogmatic in believing who is the right person divinely.
Mm.
The classrooms in Christianity is how do we believe, which is the dogma. For example, the Trinity, is the Trinity completely Trinitarian? There's Arianism. There's all kinds of explanations of the Trinity in different ways, and that's the big thing that clashes between beliefs in the church. For example, Protestantism left because of their belief that you can't get redemption by the works, only by the grace, which is a way of believing.
Okay.
To say that, let's say, for example, medieval times, all Christians believed word to word what the theologian of the time, Thomas Aquinas, wrote, or did they believe some of it and some they didn't even think about? And the theology was the theology. And they had their day-to-day practice. And their day-to-day practice didn't completely disinclude their polytheistic a priori religions, not a priori, sorry, prior religions. That the folklore wasn't there, that the faith and the concepts that were derived in those faiths weren't there. That's the difference between popular religion and
Theologians.
Theologians, dogma, the institution's actual statements.
Is there a certain style you think is, how do I put this? Because you just gave me three different ways basically the three major religions differ, right? You said Judaism is practice,
Islam is practice and belief.
Islam is practice and belief. Why wouldn't you put Judaism under that? Under practice and belief? Because
we don't have Rambam sects and Breslev sects and that kind of stuff. People who believe in the way that Rambam believe that people who believe the way that Nachman Breslev, the Emunah Tmima, aren't less Jewish than they are. But people from both those sects will say reforms are not exactly as Jewish as they are.
Mm. But
that's what I meant by klezms. As in, we were both grew up in Orthodoxy.
I did not.
You didn't grow up in Orthodoxy?
No, I grew up conservative.
So you grew up in conservative. The liberals are always more including of the others. But also in conservatism, reform is not our friend.
No, not back in
Orthodoxy
the day.
Is not our friend.
The conservative movement for sure has gone downhill since I grew up.
There's two sects of conservatism today that have gone two different directions, but we're not talking about conservatism today. But
we're not. No, but so I just want to try to get this straight in my head. So you're saying that within Islam, there's the works, right? There's the practice, and there's the belief. So the practice is the five. Would you say the five pillars of the practice?
Two of them are very important to belief.
Okay, so what is the practice within Islam, and what is the belief?
The practice is Sharia law.
Okay, so that
Sharia
would be
law doesn't actually break apart places, but there are like sects in Sunni and Shia Islam of different Sharia law.
Okay. Could you compare that to halacha when it comes to Sephardi and Ashkenaz?
Yes. Yeah. Except there's less bigotry between them. Let's just say that.
Less bigotry
inside the Sunni world, Between the four main schools, there's less like we won't marry each other and stuff like that.
Okay. Is there that stuff within the sex, like within Sephardi and within Ashkenaz?
There's schools who won't accept Sephardi girls. There's a lot of this stuff happening today, just a few 100 meters from us.
Well, I asked because a lot of the things that I've heard when it comes to at least the Sunni and Shia is that they're always attacking one another. They're always in some sort of fight. But you're saying that within
Sunni and Shia are in the biggest the Cold War that exists today, mostly in the Middle East, is between the Sunni and the Shia.
Right, but you're saying within the sects of Sunni and Shia are separate schools of belief of Sunni and Shia.
No, second schools of halachic discourse.
Okay. But they're still Sunni and they're still Shia.
Yeah.
But will a Shia
In
accept...
Shia, there's all kinds of sects because that has more to do with the fact that Shia has a pope figure kind of situation.
Okay.
So Shiism, there's different sects depending on until what number of the popes, the imams they followed.
Okay.
So Shia is a bit more complex. Sunni is pretty much
But
a
they're
thing.
Let's take the Sunnis. So this different
Each sect also has their extremists, the
Right,
same way that
but
our
will-
sects have extremists.
right, but will they accept each other within their own within different
Sunnis
schools?
accept Sunnis,
And Shia accept Shia.
yes, until certain things. Like the biggest attack on a Sunni organization was what the Al Azhar University, which is the highest Sunni university of Quran and Islam in Egypt, discommunicated,
Excommunicated.
sorry, that's the word I was looking for, excommunicated
Daesh.
ISIS.
Okay.
Why? ISIS also killed Sunnis. That's one of the reasons, except all the rest of atrocities they did in the name of Allah, which are completely and utterly not connected to the actual Quran, just have to do with their sect of Salafi jihadist.
Well, so let's get back to this the
Three religions.
Yeah, let's get back to comparing because I don't necessarily agree that Judaism is just works based and not faith based as well. So I want to we were discussing it in Islam though. So the works is Sharia. What's the faith?
What's the faith?
Yeah.
The faith is, first of all, the Shahada, which is the declaration of faith. In Sunni Islam, it's La ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah. In Shia Islam, it's La ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah wa Ali wali wa Muhammad Allah.
What does each one mean?
And the first one is just, there is no God but God. One is Muhammad, the Prophet of God. The second one is, there is no God but God. One is Muhammad, the Prophet of God. And Ali is the closest to God.
So couldn't you argue though, then if that's the faith, couldn't you argue then Shema Yisrael is our declaration of
But
faith?
we don't... Our declaration of faith, all three of the big sects in Judaism say Shema Yisrael once a day. 3 times a day. Depends how many times you pray. That has to do with the practitioner.
Right, but
all three big sects say Shema Yisrael 3 times a day. We don't believe that our faith in God is exactly the same way as his faith in God or hers faith in God. We believe, though, that we all practice in a certain way. We all serve God in a certain way. In Christianity, when you're in a church, for example, if you're in an Orthodox Pravoslavic church, you believe that people believe the way that Orthodox Pravoslavic dogma is. If you're in a Catholic church, or a Maronite, or a regular Catholic, or whatever Catholic church you are, you believe that they believe in the works, in the Catholic dogma, which includes the papal statements and all these kinds of things that have to do with the sectarianism of the way to belief.
Did you say that Christianity, the Christianity doesn't have the works, they just have the belief?
They have the works. Each sect has their works the way they do their works, but it's not what causes the chasms.
What do you mean by chasm?
What I mean by chasms is creation of different sects.
Christianity
mean-
doesn't have creation of different sects?
It has
No,
creation.
I was going to say.
No, I mean that the cause of this eruption is different in Christianity,
The cause
in
of the
Islam, and in
eruption of
Judaism.
different
different
sects.
sects.
Okay. Is different. Say can you repeat this?
The cause of the eruption of different sects is different in each of the three religions.
Okay.
In Christianity, it has to do with how to believe. That's the reason that sects divert. Because of how you are supposed to believe in God, in Jesus, in the Father,
Trinity.
the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and all the works that have to do with each other with that,
Okay.
and how to get saved and all that kind of stuff. That's how you believe. In Judaism, the big clashes are how you practice and how you work with halachic law in the modern day.
It's interesting
have-
that you
we
call
have
it
the-
lore.
What?
It's just interesting that you use the word lore.
Not law and law. There was a mix of the two.
Oh, did you say law or lore?
It can be both. But for example, the Khatam Sofer takes the sentence "Ein chadash min Torah." You know this sentence? Have you ever
It
heard
sounds
of
like
it?
there's nothing new under the sun.
There's nothing new under the sun. Ein chadash min Torah.
There's nothing new under the
It
sun.
actually comes from a piece of Talmudic literature that's talking about a certain type of wheat yevul. I don't know how you say this.
I also don't know how you say this.
A certain type of agronomic
Like grain?
grain.
Okay.
Thank you. A certain type of grain. And he took that and said that it's influenced onto the whole thing that's called halachic law. There is no new under the sun. There is no new in halachic law. Halachic law is halachic law. There's nothing you can change about it and nothing to change about it. The big statement of conservative is Yadut lehalacha mitkademet, which means they believe in halachic discourse. They believe in halachic discourse that is continuing to step forward,
Right. So I'm
which means that halachic discourse changes and adapts and takes part into it more easily the modern age.
but that seems to have,
Orthodox religion does not adapt to modern age.
right.
Modern Orthodox does it very, very well, but it does it in a much slower and gentler manner than, for example, conservatism
Well,
or reform.
Right. Well, I feel like conservatism and reform kind of have, because from what I've been reading, right, this kind of break from the idea that Torah was given at Har Sinai and divinely given, and the want to get back to Eretz Yisrael was kind of broken off within the Enlightenment period, within when in like the 1800s, when the Reform movement was actually created. There was this almost want to separate the idea that the divine did give us the Torah and that we are supposed to be part of the promised land, to no, we're Jewish, it's a cultural thing, it's a tradition thing, and we're going to practice, but we no longer are reaching for the goal of getting back to Eretz Yisrael and wanting the Beis Hamikdash rebuilt and law being done under the strict Torah law.
That's a very, very simplistic way of saying it.
I'm a simpleton. Okay,
No,
so-
it's very simplistic because I don't think that it's like it's only a culture, and that's what Reform rabbis that go to rabbinic school for 4 years will say that their faith is. It's. I'm not sure I think it's a bit of an oversimplification of the big eruption in the Enlightenment, but the big rupture in the Enlightenment, there was also a rupture inside of Orthodoxy in the beginning. That Kara has been a bit brought back together because of their fight against the others now, which are the Reform and Conservative, which is Hasidic and Litvish. That was a huge clash.
well, Litvish.
The Alter Rebbe was told on by a Litvish person to the Russian authorities and was sent to prison for it. This was a huge.
Well, I know there were huge battles within the Orthodox sect itself, within the Litvish, and like whose book? What was I reading? It was like was it the Ramchal's books? Someone didn't. I don't have the right knowledge to be able to. It's in this book that I'm reading over here, but I just don't have the information in my head.
It's completely possible that that's the look of the rabbinic Jew sects today, but I'm not sure that that's completely based on fact, though, because Judaism wasn't orthodoxy the whole way back. What is orthodoxy? Orthodoxy is creation of a new thing. It's a fundamentalist movement.
Right, but I had read that orthodoxy was the word orthodoxy, the creation of the split between those who kept Torah mitzvahs and those who didn't keep Torah mitzvahs actually came about after the Reform movement was established, and that it was more created to differentiate between people who didn't necessarily keep Torah mitzvahs as was and those who do keep Torah mitzvahs as was.
Yes, but we're talking about, this is where the concept of the theologians and the popular religion comes into shape. Because theologians from the Orthodox sect will say that, definitely. And Reformed theologians will say that the creation of orthodoxy was a clashback towards them. But Judaism as we know it is a clashback to a different religion. Rabbinic Judaism, Talmudic Judaism, the Judaism that is post-Second Temple, is completely built as a response to a different religion in a lot of ways. That different religion is Christianity.
I figured that's where you were getting. Are you talking about the Talmud, like the Talmud itself?
The Talmud itself has a lot of conversation with Christianity and fights against it. The book that was found in the Middle Ages called Sefer Toldot Yeshua, which Sefer Toldot Yeshu, they won't call it Yeshua, Sefer Toldot Yeshu, which is a book saying that Paul was a secret agent for the Sanhedrin, and he was there to. You've heard it from me.
No, I heard it before you. I remember us discussing this also, but I've heard this. Okay. I've definitely heard this before.
No, but there's this whole story that Paul was a secret agent for the Sanhedrin, and his job was to make Christianity a different religion. Paul was a bit of a meshugana. Paul is an amazing, it's fascinating writer and theologian, but he had his statement about Judaism, yes. But Christianity, there was two sects of Christianity in after the Churban, after 70 AD. There was two major sects. There was the Jewish Christians, and there was the Gentile Christians. The Gentile Christians in the end became the big thing. a lot of people have written I'm taking a seminar at the moment, which is the whole name of the course is Parting of the Ways. When and if.
Parting of the ways in what aspect?
Judaism, Christianity.
Okay. How they became separate identities?
Separate identities, or if they were ever one identity, or if there are really completely separate identities. Do Christians not consider themselves in some way or form a continuation of Judaism? It's a very interesting and discussive topic that's been written about for centuries, discussed for centuries. But they weren't the only two sects that were around in Second Temple times.
Right.
There were 5 main sects in Second Temple times.
Karaites?
Jewish historians will say there were 4. Comparative religion historians will say there were 5.
Where's the disconnect?
Christian Jews. Jesuit
No, but
Jews.
what purpose, what benefit, right? Can we call them the theologians of Judaism that would only say that they were 4, and comparative religion
Not
says there were
theologians,
5?
I said historians.
Historians, sorry.
Because
Are you saying Jewish historians would only say there are 4?
I don't know if all Jewish historians will, but when they're talking to Jews, they would say that there were 4. They were the Essenes, the Sadducees, the Zealots, and the Pharisees, and those were the 4 sects.
But what's the?
But there was a 5th sect.
But what's the? If there was a 5th sect, then what is the benefit of leaving it out?
What is the benefit of leaving it out?
Yeah.
Delegitimize.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is
if you
this
bring
is
back
this is one of
underneath the umbrella of Second Temple Judaism, Christianity, then is Christianity not Judaism?
Look, this is where I do struggle with some of this stuff. As you know, I've picked up the New Testament to read. I have told only a few people that I'm doing this, and they freak out. I'm doing it specifically for intellectual basis. I'm not looking for faith. I'm looking to be less naive of just the world, less ignorant of the world, and
you're looking to become an uncomfortable Yid.
I'm already an uncomfortable. I think
you're looking to become a more uncomfortable Yid.
Well, I think one of the reasons why I'm uncomfortable within my Yiddishkeit is, well, one, I have my own commitment issues, and I have this whole thing in my head, like, if you truly believe that Torah is MS, right, then why is it that it scares those to allow people to not journey out, but to taste other literature? Because if you're so adamant that your thing is true, then where's the fear? And this is the issue that I'm having with what you're telling me, is that there's 4, but there's maybe 5, and they don't want to teach it. But if you're so adamant that what you have to preach and what you're selling is the truth, then me
Good
reading
question for a rabbi. But I'm an agnostic. I'm an extreme agnostic. We've been through this,
which I find super interesting, because
it's not something that a lot of people call themselves extreme agnostics.
It's not just that; it's just your interest in faith, in different faiths, doesn't seem to have led you to faith.
My interest in faith is my faith.
Your interest in faith is your faith. Can you elaborate on that?
There's a big 3 words when it comes to religion, right? There's theism, which is belief in a god or whatever. There's atheism, which is pretty much non-belief, but people will say there is a belief to not believe. We're not going to get into that discussion. And then there's agnosticism. Agnosticism nowadays is usually just given as like a by the way kind of statement.
Like, I believe that there's something, but I'm not sure what it is.
I'm not sure. I haven't found enough proof for either side, but I'm whatever.
I think it's lazy. I think it's intellectually lazy.
Wait,
Yeah.
I consider myself an extreme agnostic. What I mean, I haven't found proof on that side. I haven't found proof on this side. I decided to live b'tzel hamachloket. I believe that there is no such thing as a divine and constant truth.
Interesting.
There is no such thing as truth when it comes to faith, because faith is faith and truth is truth. Faith and fact are not exactly the same thing.
No, I will agree with this, but I think that you can logically get. I was having this conversation with another on the podcast, and I don't know if I got my thinking out clearly, but I think that there is a logical way you can come to the understanding that there has to be a creator, a single creator of the universe and everything.
A single?
Yeah.
Why?
Because if the argument that I make, right, is that something finite can't create itself, right? There always has to be something to create something else, but finite can't create itself, then what created the first finite thing? And that has to be outside of the finite, and the infinite, from my understanding, by definition, is one, is everything all kind of bunched together.
Yeah.
And so for me, that makes logical sense. It's getting to the religion part of it that I struggle with when it comes to the singling out of a nation. You know, that these are the people, or these are the people, or these are the people. Everyone wants to say that
the way.
Everyone wants to say that they're the people and that they have the way. That is harder for me to get to, but I think it is intellectually lazy of people when they go, we just don't know. I don't have proof for this. I don't have proof for this. You can logically
but there's a
get
difference
to,
between just saying agnosticism there's a difference in what I'm saying as an agnostic and what other people will say as agnostic.
Can you elaborate?
Because people who will say, I just don't, I've researched both sides and I've had enough and I've just decided that I don't know, which agnostica is knowledge, the absence of knowledge. That's the literal terminology of the word. And there's people like me who believe that human purpose is to research and study and look, even though there isn't effectual truth. It's our interest in our life to just continue and study and research and find and see how these things developed and see how they influence each other and see how magnificent this world is.
So do you not think that there's a universal truth?
When it comes to what aspect?
If you're saying...
I think there are truths. Plural.
Heard. But the idea of a universal truth, right? That would you say that murder being bad is a universal truth?
You would agree that depends when.
Well, there's a difference between murder and killing.
Okay.
There's a difference between...
But that's already something that you put into the case. The differentiation that you made in your head between killing and murder is a differentiation. But
the only reason why I have that in my head is because of what I've learned from my lack of knowledge or my little knowledge within Torah, is that there's a differentiation within the Sarah Sadibros. We'll talk about the Ten Commandments. There, when people say thou shalt not kill, it's not thou shalt not kill, it's thou shalt not murder, which shows you that there's a differentiation between murder and killing. Just like I think there's a different...
but that's through faith.
Why is that through faith? Why is that not a universal...
You can claim... I like being the devil's advocate.
The idea of taking...
I'm just putting it out there. I like being the devil's advocate. It helps people think. And sometimes I do it not completely with
you can be whatever you want here. You can be the devil, you can be the angel, whatever you want.
No, but you understand what I meant by the devil's advocate. The concept of murder and what we declare murder and what we declare killing is a social construct. So social constructs have what would call righteousness. What is righteous and what is not. But is that what is true and what is not?
But what makes something righteous and what makes something not righteous? Because when you're talking about righteousness, that has to come. Righteousness, I feel, comes from an idea of there has to be something holy.
It's not that there has to be something holy. It's what, in the end of the day, what I believe that is what is the end of the righteousness is what will be good for the community. We are a communal being. We are a communal being. We have always been a communal being from the day that our ancestors differentiated from the monkeys all the way back 200 million years ago. We have always lived in communities. We have. We have always lived in communities. We have always had different roles in the communities. And murder is something that blasts a community. If someone inside a community murders another person inside the community, that causes ripples.
Mm-hmm.
So in our being, we have something against murder.
Right, but wouldn't you say then that that's universal?
I don't know if that's universal or evolutionary. What are we talking about universal? Does universal have to do with faith, or does it have to... You know what do you understand what I'm saying? Is universal science or is universal religion? In your perspective.
In my perspective?
Because I think that these are two different things. There can be scientific fact. And there can be religious faith, which is complete faith. But is the faith completely truthful? And is the fact completely not possible to be discredited?
Well, I feel like if you have a fact, it's a fact.
Yeah, if a fact is a fact. But, for example, exact sciences are completely based off of mathematics. Correct?
I'm going to take your word for it.
Most of them are based off of mathematics.
Okay.
For example, physics is completely based off of mathematics. But mathematics is a social construct that we created.
I feel like I'm not the
devil's
person.
advocate.
Right. But I'm not the person to talk to. So as the devil's advocate, I would be like, well, wouldn't mathematics be a universal truth? Couldn't you hold 2 + 2 will always equal 4? Yes.
But what is 2 and what is 2 and what is 4?
2 is 1 and 1 thing together makes 2, and 2
what
and
made
2
that be
things.
one thing?
Say that again.
What makes that be 1 and 1? You understand what I'm saying?
I understand what you're saying,
that
but
everything can be questioned. Everything.
That's fine.
Except what we've seen to work. For example, I believe in medicine. I believe in science.
Wait, can you repeat this? You believe in what?
Medicine.
No. But what works, right?
I believe in what shows proof.
Of it working. Of something working.
Not only it working. Shows the proof. Shows actual proof.
Of what? Shows proof of what?
Of it. Of the cause and effect that it's trying to show, of the fact that energy is something that moves around, that motion becomes heat, and that therefore part of the energy that was put into the motion becomes the heat, that kind of stuff, things that are being proven.
Okay, you would call these facts?
These are facts in some way or form.
So
but also those facts. Maybe one day someone will come and say that energy doesn't exactly work that way. And he will find a good enough theory that will discredit the whole theory of energy. Maybe.
Well, so my question to you would be, if we're going with this definition, then could you put it to the Jewish nation and say we've been around for so long that there has to be something factual about what we're doing?
We've been around in our current state of rabbinical Judaism the same amount of time as Christianity. And if we're talking about religions that have been around for, say, long, Hinduism has also been around for 4,000, 5,000 years. Does that make Hinduism correct? It's a very problematic statement to say that, oh, because the Jews have been around for 2,000, some will say 3,000, 2,500 years. Because we've been around.
Let's talk. Not are you talking specifically rabbinic Judaism? Because I'm talking about Bnei Yisrael in general. From the time that from the time Yaakov Avinu had his sons until now.
Okay. That's claiming that Yaakov Avinu actually was a person that physically was.
I believe that Yaakov Avinu.
Okay,
yes.
You believe that
No,
Yaakov Avinu was an actual person who actually was.
There are reasons behind this.
I believe that the first historical figure in our nation is King Josiah.
What if you were to meet somebody that has a family tree that goes all the way back to Yaakov Avinu?
People can have family trees that go back all the way and still most of it be myth.
You think so?
Yes, because remember that we have a few good generations in the New Testament and the Old Testament, and in the Talmud from the days of Yaakov till the days of King David, and from King David till the days of King Josiah and King Joachim.
Yeah, but if you're tracing your lineage back, and at some point you get two people in the Torah, that
doesn't mean that those people are real.
How is that possible? So where I struggle to grasp that concept, because if
this is a first-hand source. It's a first-hand source. There's no secondary hand source saying these people actually were. There's no other evidence except your list of names that someone could have added
with
names.
Bibliography?
With bibliography.
Yeah.
All the way to the last generation before the names that are written in the Torah.
No, with the names that are written in the Torah.
Yes, but the names from the names of written in the Torah to somewhere, who knows if they're true? Who knows if this is truthful fact? These are the names of the people who were there and that and that. We don't know. There's no way of lochiach. There's no way to prove it. There is no way to prove it. There's this amazing, it's stupid. There's this TV show called Clunk on Earth. Have you seen it?
Mm-mm.
It's a comedian she's a part. It's like a figure that she is when she's doing these things. And she does like documentaries, but she says like stupid things and comes together with people and discusses things. So she's talking about Genesis and the beginning and all of that with one of the highest theologians in theological scholars in Britain, and she asks, is there a proof of God? And the man said, the proof of God is not. There is no proof that is completely satisfying to everyone except the person who wrote it.
Say that again.
I'm not sure if I'm saying exactly what he said, but there is no proof of the divine that is completely accepted by everyone except the person who wrote it.
Okay.
So she makes a joke. Is there a chance that God had a brother named Samuel? And he says, I don't know. Could have Samuel have created the world? I don't know. It's a stupid joke, but there's a point, a theological point here, a theological statement that there is no such thing as divine proof that is completely and utterly proof to all, unless one day, God will suddenly appear to the whole planet
A lot of people believe
with
that.
cameras. No, unless it actually happens. And it's found to be proofful. Today, if someone says he's gotten a message from God and he's a prophet.
You think they're crazy.
Exactly.
So what
Kurdiger wrote a whole book
Who?
called, I think Kurdiger his name is. I don't remember exactly his name. It's called that's Kierkegaard, sorry. Select bibliography. Fear and Trembling.
Okay.
Fear and Trembling, which is translated into an amazing name, Chilverada, because it comes from the Torah. The name. He wrote a work he's a Danish philosopher, theologian in the 18th or 19th century. I don't remember exactly. He wrote this book. He wrote several works. One of them is called Fear and Trembling, Chilverada. In this, he discusses the whole concept of the Akedah. What was the proof that Abraham was doing the moral thing?
What was the proof that Abraham was doing the moral thing?
What was the proof that Abraham was actually told by God to take his son?
Oh well, I would have said that the God telling Abraham to do it would be the.
But only Abraham heard what God told Abraham to do.
Mm-hmm.
The word here is faith. The only way to fully accept that Abraham was told by God to take his son and sacrifice him is faith. There is no other way to told it. There is no way to prove that Abraham was spoken to by God.
But that's fine if you're talking about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But
you can take it all the way.
No, you can't,
Yes.
because part of the Jewish belief is that God spoke to the entire Jewish people at Mount Sinai.
Okay.
Right? So that's not one person just being spoken to by God. That's What'd you say?
It's a story we tell ourselves. Where is also the whole concept in the same books? We are told that Abraham was told by God to sacrifice his son. It's the same books.
Right. No, I understand that, but if your argument is just predicated on
Faith.
Well, how do we know if
Faith.
God? No, it's fine.
But there is no proof except faith, and faith is not something that has obsoletes of truth. You can believe it. That's why there are truths in faith. You can completely and utterly believe that your faith is truth. But it doesn't mean that it's truth. It doesn't mean it's the only truth. It doesn't mean it's completely truthful and factual. I studied several religions. I don't
What are the religions that you study?
I mostly delve into Abrahamic religions and ancient religions. Ancient, if you consider extinct religions, let's just say it that way. Because some of my religions that I discuss are from the Middle Ages, and that's not so ancient. That's the main religion I'm studying, is Middle Ages, Germanic, Nordic. It's Middle Ages. But it doesn't matter if I show that German Protestantism or German Catholicism has Germanic religion in it. It doesn't matter when I'm talking to a German Catholic or German Protestant. Because it doesn't matter what he thinks. What I think matters what he believes. It doesn't mean if I actually find factual evidence or theological actual evidence, written evidence, of the syncretism that I'm trying to show.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't change the belief of the day-to-day Christian. German Christian, specifically. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Kind of. I don't know if I'm.
We discussed
I don't know if I'm following
we discussed this a
completely.
few days ago when we talked about the Palestinians, for example. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you believe that there is no such thing as a Palestinian nation. Because it's not helpful to the situation if you believe that there's no such thing as a Palestinian nation, therefore these people are all just one big liars and stuff like that.
No, I agree.
understand what I'm
We've talked.
saying?
Yeah, we've talked about this because especially in a day and age where we can't as Jews, right? This part from what I understand, the argument, right, that the Zionist movement will make is that Jews have the right to self-determination, that we have a right to the self-determination in the land of Israel because it's our ancestral right,
Homeland.
our ancestral right and homeland. That's what I meant by right. It's our birthright. But then going
That's the basis of Zionism.
right, but then going
That's the
back
basic
well,
Zionism.
and this is what we talked about because when for me we can get into this if we get into this, but I find it personally difficult to be like the Palestinians aren't real people, even though I've definitely probably said it in passing, and with the Torah, where the Torah says you'll be something by a non-nation, and people want to throw the Palestinians onto this. My whole thing is that if we're going to say that we deserve right to self-determination, even if you want to say that the Palestinian identity started in 1968, 64, 67, whenever.
The common statement is it was started in 1961, but it's not true.
Whatever it is, I'm not going to deny a group of people the right to self-determination. Just let's live peacefully. Just don't try to kill me. I'm cool. You know what I'm saying?
Well, that's where conflict comes into the scenario, and conflict is a big issue, and we are the longest standing conflict.
Who, the Jews?
No, the Jewish-Palestinian conflict is the longest standing conflict that's actually active today.
Longer than Pakistani and India? I understand that Pakistan was founded around the same time.
Pakistan and India wasn't a big conflict before the Brits sowed the conflict into it.
By creating Pakistan and India?
By doing Hafred Umshal. You know what Hafred Umshal is?
No.
Separate and govern. I don't know if it's a word in English, but to separate two groups and demonize them to each other and govern them. And therefore, you don't have an uprising against you.
So you create a conflict against two people. So it's like, you guys fight.
I'll govern you
We're
on
just
top.
here playing.
You fight
fiddle.
each other. We will still be in charge. Pakistan and India was supposed to be one
but
state.
could you not say the same thing about what the Brits did with the land of Palestine as it was back then? Because why haven't the Brits come out and be like, no guys, we own this land and we have the Balfour Declaration and we're gonna.
Because the Brits also didn't only promise this land to us. That's the whole thing. This land was not only promised by the Balfour Declaration to the Jews. It was also promised to the princes of the Hashemite kingdoms and to the Arabs.
Is that why they split off Jordan and which was Transjordan at the time? And Israel.
Yes.
But so can't you make the argument that the Palestinians have a land that is Jordan?
But most of the Palestinians aren't from that land.
But aren't most of the Palestinians, at least ancestral-wise, from Egypt, from Saudi Arabia, outside of?
You need to remember that Palestine, or Sham, as it's called in Arabic, the Sham is Syria, Greater Syria. Greater Syria was governed by different empires since the 6th century. There was never a independent Egypt, an independent Syria, an independent Lebanon.
No, but
6th
the Egyptians that are living
century.
in Egypt now aren't the original Egyptians. Same thing with Lebanese and Syrians. Like, from my understanding, is that all of there were
The Americans
separate.
that lived,
But you know,
where does this end?
No, for sure. I'm saying that you can say I wouldn't deny somebody's ancestry. Like, if I was talking to a Palestinian and they were like, my generations have been here for 4, 5, 6 generations, I'm not going to deny that. I'm not going to deny that this is somebody's home. But just because this is somebody's home doesn't mean it's their ancestral land.
What makes something an ancestral land?
It's a good question. No, it's a good question. It's a very good question. So would your argument be that somebody who was born, say, 20 years ago in the land of Israel...
We believe that Abraham came from Mesopotamia.
No, it's true. So would you say then the only reason why the Bnei Israel believe that we have a unique claim to the land of Israel is God-given?
Is God-given and historical. But also the Palestinians have God-given and historical. And it does not...
Whoa.
It does not clash.
Whoa.
First of all, genetical.
People.
Most Palestinians...
The where I just got hung up on was saying that they have a God-given right to this land.
I don't know if they have a God-given right to this land. Sorry, that's not what I meant.
That's where I went.
That was a mistake. That was a mistake. But also, where do we prove a God-given right, and who can claim a God-given right and not a God-given right?
Well, I'm saying if you point to the Torah, if you point to the
right.
Torah,
if you point to the Quran and the Hadith, all prophecy comes from the Holy Land. And even Muhammad came to the Holy Land and went up to God.
That's fine, but saying that this land was God given to another people, I don't think you can go that far.
I don't think you can say that any land is told to be God given.
Well, obviously you can if you can point to the Torah and say that.
No, except this situation here. What other nation claims that God gave them their land?
I don't think any other nation.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
so
what's the point?
So nations have other stories that claim why their land is their land.
Mm-hmm. Can you give me another story?
The Brits have the whole story of the fights against the Danes, and they have their history and their story of how they united into a kingdom. England has their story, Scotland has their story, Wales has their story, and Ireland has their story. And then at some stage, all those stories collided in King James the Sixth, the First.
Mm-hmm.
And then the United Kingdom was created. Charlemagne.
But my question is,
all of these kingdoms in Europe consider themselves descendants of Charlemagne.
Okay.
Charlemagne, this mythical, God-given king of the Holy Roman Empire. Do you know what Charlemagne actually stands for?
Mm-mm.
Karl Magnus. Charles the Great.
Okay.
He was appointed by the Pope to be the king of the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. And the Jews has stories that go back to Charlemagne, and everybody has stories that go back to Charlemagne.
That's fine, but like the claim that God gave a people a land seems, from my
to me
little knowledge,
like
but
something that is unprovable.
Hold on. But it's a unique claim to the Jewish people.
It's a unique claim.
It's a unique claim. Why hasn't any other people made such a claim? If it's because it's a powerful claim to claim that God gave me
claim.
to claim that God gave you a land
God
is a very
bless
powerful
America
claim.
is like the main slogan of the United States.
Yeah, but no one claims that God told we're not, let's leave Christopher Columbus out of this because everyone's
Let's leave Christopher Columbus. Let's talk about the Anabaptists and the people who moved to America because their faith was being
right. And I remember they felt
persecuted in Britain,
they felt a real kinship to the Israelites leaving
and the
Egypt.
Mormons who actually think that God gave them the land of Utah.
Is that true?
Jesus came to America. That's what the Mormons believe. Mormons
Right,
are whatever. Let's not talk about that. It's a very special and funny sect. Sorry, Mormons. I didn't mean to make fun of you. But they have a very interesting and different cosmology. They have a very different and interesting cosmology. But in the end of the day, what I'm trying to say is that we are claiming something that is based on faith. We are claiming something that is based on faith alone. That God gave us this piece of land that is based on faith alone.
Okay.
There's no other way to prove it.
So
except faith.
let's leave faith out of it then. How would you say then that land is kind of stamped with this is our land?
First of all, I believe that there's more than one indigenous people to one piece of land. There is
this
a
is
lot
a belief,
of claims
or is this
there's a lot of claims for that. There's proof that the whole story of Belgium, which is two nations, the Belgians and the Flemish, who lay claim to the same piece of land and created a country together. Navajo and Native American tribes coincide on top of each other sometimes. Their lands, the lands that they were originally from. The concept of indigeneity is an interesting concept. I don't know how to prove it exactly. I do know that there are DNA genetic studies that show that most Jews and most Palestinians have common ancestry to Canaanite DNA. A lot of us are Canaanites, in a way. The best community to check this DNA towards is the Samaritans, because they've been here for forever. Samaritans haven't moved out of this land, and they've become smaller because they only move into this land, and the Samaritans have been here since Second Temple times. We know that for a fact. Samaritans have a lot of common DNA tracks with Jews and with Palestinians.
I'll have to look this up myself.
It's an interesting topic.
No, it's fine. But everything we've been talking about, I have to look up because you're right. Trust but verify.
Yes.
This is the whole reason. Not the whole reason, but this is one of the reasons for this podcast is that I can be able to listen back to these and try to make up my own mind, my own what I believe, what I find is fact. But it's like, how do you discern what from what you're saying, right? Which I would say you claim to be faith, some you would claim to be fact, along with a rabbi or somebody that I have on who would claim possibly different faith and different fact. This is one of my struggles. There's so much information out there, and there's so many people claiming different things to be fact. That it's like how am I supposed to make my decision on this stuff? Like, I want the truth to just smack me in the face and be like, this is it.
Good luck.
Appreciate it.
Because that will never happen.
Oh, whoa, never say never.
No,
never
the
say
truth
never.
will never smack you in the face and say, this is the truth. That's my belief. I'm an extreme agnostic.
Well, if it ever hits you in the faith, because how old are you?
How old am I? 26.
Please God, you have many years.
27 in a month and a bit.
Well, please God, wish you happy birthday then. But please God, you have, as we say, Ad Mea Surim, you have many years to come, and perhaps it will hit you in the face.
I hope it never does.
No? Why is that?
Because it will change the way I live my life in the fact of absence of the truth.
Why is that a bad thing, though, that it would change your life?
I don't.
Isn't something
I
people
don't.
crave truth? Don't lie to me. Give me the truth. Tell me the truth. I want to know the facts. I want to know the truth.
I for one never tell. I'm very bad at lying, and I really feel bad when I lie. But that's different than faith. That's different than God. That's different than gods, messiahs, um, these kind of things. That's my truth. That's my basis.
What brought we started this conversation on how you grew up, and so I'm like curious if because I'm gonna play devil's advocate right now. Like, I feel like someone sitting across from you could be like, how is it you must have had a trauma growing up to have pushed you away from Judaism and Yiddishkeit to go down this rabbit hole of trying to prove it wrong or just
I'm not
or
proving it
find
wrong.
other. I don't think you're trying to prove it wrong. Just
Exactly.
you know,
There's a few types of datlashim.
what's
People
a datlash?
dati l'shava. Off the derech people.
Mm-hmm.
There's off the derech people who become anti-religion. Anti-Judaism, anti-religion, anti-anything that has to do with religion or Judaism specifically. And there are people who are more chill with it. There will be people who are more traditional. There will be people that are more questioning. There are all kinds of things. As my grandfather, alav shalom, would have said, there's no such thing as off the derech. There's finding your own derech. And that's like one thing that I look up to the most in my grandfather was that statement that I learned to know by him. There is no such thing as off the derech. There's finding your own derech.
Was your grandfather a religious man?
My grandfather was close to the Rebbe and was Rav Soloveitchik's driver when he was younger. And my grandfather was a rabbi till the day he passed away in 2014. His library was bigger than the studio and stacked to the brim. He was a very interesting and thoughtful and amazing character. But
so what led you, let's say, off the derech and into this what almost seems like a thirst to study other faiths within the realm of the Abrahamic religions? And
because I have this first to understand why people need a divinity. Why do humans have this eagerness to find a divinity, an explanation, a divine force? What is this huge interest of humanity? How did faiths become what they are today? How did countries decide to be this faith or the other? How did faith cease to exist? What caused that? This is fascinating. It's like for a historian. Why does a historian want to study history so much? Why do any academics who aren't... Okay, you can also say about direct sciences, but I have an issue with direct sciences. No, I don't really have an issue with direct sciences.
what is
I just don't
what are direct sciences?
I think I'm not saying something
Correct.
Imperial sciences. I meant.
Okay, I'm going to ask the same question. What is imperial sciences?
Not imperial. מדעים מדויקים. As in math, physics, biology, all these
like
things.
exact sciences?
Exact sciences, thank you. Exact sciences. I just don't understand the thirst and interest in them. It's each to his own. But people who study humanities have some sort of itch or something that just makes them so thirsty to knowledge about this specific information, specific
Because I don't
area.
get from you that you, because I feel like sometimes when one could run into someone like you who is doing comparative religion or what they're, I feel like you could get the feeling that they're trying to almost disprove, but you're not coming to disprove religion.
I'm coming to
You're,
compare.
what's the comparison? What is the what is the uniqueness?
It's fascinating to see comparisons between, for example, I wrote a paper about dualistic aspects of Christianity and Pure Land Buddhism in Japan. These two things that were developed in two different sides of the world. And both of them believe in another land that is the way to salvation and the amazing world. And this fascinating thing. And there's an amazing, amazing quote that one of the Jesuit priests were the big studiers of other faiths in those days because they were open to doing those things. One of these Jesuit priests quotes a Pure Land Buddhist monk saying that these Christians are changing our faith and bringing it in a different light and are just copying us. Which is an amazing statement because it doesn't have to be copied. It can be just something fascinating that is developed on two different sides of the world because of something a priori that is based inside of us.
Is there any part of you that hopes Judaism is true or hopes that another religion is true, or is there any want in you that wishes that the stories and traditions of your ancestors are actually true?
I believe that some of the stories of my ancestors are true. I believe that there were people who lived in this land. Second Temple times. First Temple times maybe. They just didn't originate in Egypt or in Mesopotamia. They originated here.
Where does this come from?
Where does it come from? There's a few theories about the fact that Israelites were actually just Canaanites, and then they unified underneath the name of Israelites, and began to believe, and King Josiah did the reforms in the faith and got rid of all the other gods except Jehovah, and that's where Judaism became monotheistic or monoliturgic, which means believe there are other gods, henotheistic, but we serve only one. There's a point where that happened. There is a point where that happened.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I want so badly to believe Judaism is true. There's just like this part of me that it's like, this is what I grew up being told. This is what I don't want to say fell into, but started discovering, I guess, back in 2013 when I started to go into yeshiva. What would happen if it wasn't?
What will happen to you if you believe that it suddenly understood that it isn't? What are your core values in the end of the day? Are they Judaism or are they your core values?
What are my core values at the end of the day? No, my core values at the end of the day are honesty, loyalty, and respect. And this comes from a lot of introspection and not myself being honest, loyal, or respectful for a long time. I had to, in order for me to find my own values, which it upsets me that it took me a long time to figure them out. But I was like, what did I expect from other people? I expected honesty, loyalty, and respect, and I had to question if I was giving them myself. I don't necessarily think religions teach that.
Because
But if Judaism wasn't true, I think more so, I don't know if I would feel lied to, or if I would feel
if the faith wasn't
lost.
true, but the people was.
If the faith wasn't true, but the people were. What do you mean?
What if it doesn't matter if you were if we were born from a man who came from Mesopotamia to Israel and then went down to Egypt with one of his sons, and then we came out of there and stuff
Well,
like
I
that.
think
What if we were a nation that lived here under two kingdoms, because there is no evidence of a united kingdom, but we're not getting into that, under the kingdom of Israel and Judea, and then we were exiled and we came back and we lived here underneath other authorities, but we lived in this place called Judea and in Galilee. And we lived here and spent here time, and then we were dispersed around the globe. Why can't that be a different truth?
Well, I think
Why can't that be Judaism?
what I would say is, then what connects us? If you're gonna point,
Ancestry and tradition.
say that again.
Ancestry and culture and tradition.
I don't think it's strong enough.
I think it's strong enough for a lot of other nations.
Do you?
Yes.
You think just the tradition and the fact that your people is strong enough?
Yes. What makes the Moroccans Moroccans?
They're from Morocco.
And
Right, but you have a bunch.
but they have this
Are you
this
talking?
pride.
Are you talking about all Moroccans or just Jewish Moroccans?
I'm talking about all Moroccans.
All Moroccans? Well, couldn't you say that a Jewish Moroccan is different from a regular Moroccan? Maybe they would share cultural aspects, but the Judaism aspect would influence the way that the Jewish Moroccan
Because
culture
that
is.
Judaism is a nation.
But Judaism also is
let's not
practice.
look at the
Judaism
Jews.
is also practice.
Well, wait. Let's take away this title called Judaism, okay? Let's not look at the Jewish perspective of when I'm giving these examples. What makes French people French?
They're from France.
And
They speak French.
they're an ethnic group. They speak French, they have French culture, they have French literature, they have French history, they have ancestry to France. They are French.
Right.
And they are proud to be French. A lot of French people are proud to be French. A lot of Germans are proud to be German. The fact that there's far-right movements means that there are extremist pride countries, people of their countries. What makes MAGA people MAGA? What
Right,
makes them
but-
American?
Well, they're from America.
And
And they like Trump
why?
because they hold similar values.
And what makes that America to them? Why are they so proud of being American?
Because they believe that America was founded on certain values, and they believe that Trump holds up those certain values.
And it's their culture. It's their people. It's their nation in some way or form.
Right, but I would say that the difference between these examples and the Jewish people is that for years the Jewish people didn't have a homeland to rally around, to be able to say they're as much as we want to say our ancestry is from Israel, but we didn't have a land that we all were generated.
Always with what? A desperation to this land, to this land that we came from, that our culture surrounds.
Right,
Our
so
culture
we
is
always
part
had
of.
some sort of connection to it.
Yes, there's another nation today that has such a situation in diaspora.
You're talking about the Palestinians.
Yes. This tie of expectation to return. That's the big thing that makes these nations nations that can be without a nation state. This expectation to return, this eager and the concept that this piece of land has an importance in their culture, in our culture, in our tradition. If we look at poetry and everything has somehow Israel involved in it. Hebrew poetry, Jewish poetry has somehow this piece of land, somehow words from the Tanakh, words from that describe Israel, things about the Nophim in Israel, this desperation. People who are not religious, who come to this land, and when they make Aliyah, they go and foreign kiss the piece of land. People who want to be buried with a little bit of land from this piece of land. This is not only got to do with God. This has got to do with people. I'm a humanist. I'm a complete humanist. I believe humanity is an amazing experiment, and that there are ethnic groups. I am ethnically Jewish. Does that mean that I believe that if I get married with a non-Jew, my children aren't Jewish? No, my children will always be Jewish. Because Judaism is their nation and history and culture and tradition and stuff like that. And my kids, even if they would grow up in Europe or grow up wherever, will always be taught about A.D. Gordon, about Tanakh, about all these things, stories and Jews, and even the biggest scar in our nation. Well, they'll know about it. They'll learn about the Holocaust. They'll learn about what it means to be Jewish and what it meant to be Jewish throughout the years. And that, yes, we are part of a nation, this great nation. And that's what being Jewish is for me. It doesn't have to do with who the mother of my children is. It doesn't have to do with if I shomer Shabbos and believe in God the One, and that He promised us this land, and that's what makes us a nation, because we were promised this land to our forefathers who might be mythological or not. That's not what makes me Jewish. I'm culturally Jewish. I love Echad Ha'am and Aleph Dalet Gordon's writings. I think they're inspirational. They are based on culture, not only Judaism as a religion. I really suggest reading them. They only have, sadly, Aleph Dalet Gordon's books are in Hebrew, but
do you not think that if you lose the works of Judaism, of being Jewish, then you're missing part of the culture?
No. Because kashrut doesn't make you Jewish. Putting on tzitzis doesn't make you Jewish.
Someone would say your birth through your mother would make you Jewish.
To me, Jewish is ancestry and upbringing. Ethnicity is language, literature, art, theater, culture, and religion. But it's all those things as well. And that is not more important than all those other things.
I want to make it very clear to the audience, though, that this conversation is not to try to get people to think, to pull away from certain things or whatnot.
No, I completely say you believe what you believe and what makes you believe. And what connects you to You will call it Yiddishkeit, but I will call it your Judaism, your connection to this nation. Whatever makes you connected, be your guest. To me, as long as it's not attacking other nations, as long as it's not extremism, as long as it's not Ubermenschen. Like Kahanism believes that Jews are the chosen people, we are better than everybody else, and
I don't know. You could talk. I've had this conversation. Different. It does not mean better.
yes.
Because I'm somebody who does believe that we're different.
Every nation is different.
For sure, every nation is different, and many nations believe that they are chosen by God. This is not an exception to Judaism. We know this.
Exactly. But it's your nation, and this is your nation. That's how you connect to it. When my parents told me all the time that they scared that I don't have a connection to Judaism, I have a connection to Judaism. It's just not your Judaism. It's not the religion, the orthodoxy, the way that you believe that Judaism is.
Look, personally, I've never thought that of you. It's one of the reasons why I wanted you on the podcast, and one of the reasons why I love speaking with you, because I believe you are a fountain of knowledge, and I believe you will only get more knowledgeable. And my hope is that as I go on this quest of finding knowledge, of making myself what I believe is less ignorant, because I believe ignorance has a very strong way of leading people to radicalism.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could say the opposite as well.
Mm-hmm.
That maybe a
too much of the one of specific sectarial knowledge
can lead to extremism as well. And like I said again, I want to get to a point where it comes that I am able to take two sides of an argument and be able to come to my own conclusion of my own faiths and my own beliefs, because that's all I want. I want to be able to make a decision. And I pray that throughout this, that when you get your BA and your MA
and my doctorate,
and your doctorate, please God, and as I continue this journey of trying to figure out how to do this whole Jew thing, that we get to sit down again and have more of this conversation with what you've learned and what I've learned, and see what comes of it.
In the end of the day, as we said before, like my grandfather said, there's no such thing as off the derech, which means there's no such thing as the right derech. There's finding your own derech.
Well, I think it's something that is I want to look to. Let's talk Hillel and Shammai, two people who had very different views on halacha. I want to stress how important I think that is, to be able to sit down, because I feel like lahavdil, this is the Hillel Shammai that we need to have. That just because I believe something and you believe something, we can sit down and have this conversation.
Exactly.
And that's okay.
That's what I do interfaith dialogue, and I do dialogue exactly because of that. Because it doesn't. We're both humans. We're all humans in the end of the day.
But I think this is a chavrusa. This is a chavruta. And I think more people
Also,
need to have...
dialogue is a chavrusa.
That's what I'm saying.
Everything is a chavrusa.
You think everything is a chavruta?
Not everything, but everything that is full-heartedly involved in the conversation, in an aspect of trying to understand and sometimes disagree, and accepting the fact that the other person has beliefs that might not coincide with your beliefs, is a chavrusa. Pluralism is the basis of a chavrusa.
So this is a question I've been asking before we end. What do you think Judaism or B'nai Yisrael needs to figure out? Where do you think we need to be introspective on to move forward, because I think it's great. The Israel advocacy, I think it is important to point out the Jew hatred that's out in the world, that's kind of sprouted. But I also am a big believer in, you also have to look inwards. Just because you're doing work outside doesn't.
A very important thing is that we are not always in the right. Stop being apologetic. Stop being Jewish apologetic. The Jews are humans like everybody else, and do mistakes, and do things correctly, and do things amazingly, and also do things terribly. We are not always in the right.
This is something else we've also talked about, is the trying to romanticize
Yes.
Judaism, because I want to believe the best of Judaism.
But that's already discarding all the bad things that happen throughout Judaism.
And I think it's something that it's important to be able to live in a reality that, like you're saying,
It
we
is
are human.
important to be an uncomfortable human being. It is important to be an uncomfortable Yid. It is. Because no nation can be completely comfortable, especially not ours.
I really hope that we get to sit down and do this again, as we both consume, please God, more knowledge. Do you want people to be able to find you or email you to get in contact with you?
If they want, they can contact you and
I'll
pass it on.
pass it on and run it by you.
Yeah.
Okay. Because usually I ask people to look in the camera and say where.
If you want to have a conversation, hear more, no hate mail, you can talk with Eli and he will contact me.
Cool. Matan, thanks for coming on. Appreciate
Thank you for having me.